This is a completely unique kind of lens, of which I've never seen anything quite like it before. And it's made by a company called PolarPro. They're well known for making photography accessories, camera bags, and filters. But this is the first mirrorless camera lenses that they've ever made, at least as far as I know. And each of the lenses has a custom designed polymer optic, which gives you a look out of camera that is something like a nostalgic camera look, or maybe a disposable film camera, which is something that has been done before. But in these lenses, first of all, it's not just a cheap plastic lens, it's an all metal lens. It actually feels like quite a high quality product. But in addition to that, they've added a feature which they call the light leak feature. And you'll notice on each of these lenses, they have a little sheath on the side, and these sheaths can be slid up, which reveals a window underneath, and that window allows light to leak in from the side. Now, this gives you a look which is similar to using one of these disposable cameras when they had a bit of a light leak, and this can either desaturate the whole image or just create kind of like a half moon across the image. This all depends on how much you slide the sheath up or down and which direction you point it, depending on which way the light is coming from. So this is a unique feature and a totally unique look, which I really haven't seen out of any lens before. And just a quick disclosure, I did ask PolarPro to send these out to me so I could have a look at them. I'm under no obligation to make a video, and they've had no say in the making of this video. I will put links in the description down below to all three of these lenses, but I will also put a link to something that I think works exceptionally well with these lenses, and that is these mini flashes by TT Artisan. These are about $30, and when you combine these with the PolarPro lenses, you get a look that is very, very similar to a disposable film camera, and it is a pretty cool look. And I also want to say that I don't think these lenses are necessarily going to be for everyone, because they are not expensive, but they aren't necessarily cheap either. And you can currently get some third-party lenses that are decent, high-quality autofocus lenses, not just stylized lenses like these, at a very, very similar price point. So I think these are going to be for people that are looking for that specific look. But I think one of the cool things about YouTube is you can kind of live vicariously through me by watching this video and kind of have fun looking at what you can do with lenses like these without even buying them. And I think one question people might ask is, would I buy one of these lenses with my own money? And yes, I would say that I would. I would probably buy one of them, but I'll kind of talk about that as we go through the video. And although the lenses give you this interesting nostalgic look, they don't feel like toys or cheap by any means. They are an all metal body. They have a metal mount. They actually even have a filter thread, 58mm filter thread across all of them. So if you want to use an ND filter and use it for stylized video, you can. And everything about it, even this ring that slides up and down, feels extremely premium. Now, these are fixed focus lenses, so there is no manual focus to worry about. They're also fixed aperture lenses, which means there is no aperture to worry about. So the only control point on this lens is this light leak feature, which is this sliding sheath. And actually that moves and feels really nice and smooth. So even though they're inexpensive lenses, they don't feel like cheap lenses by any means. Now you're going to have a choice of 3 different focal lengths, but I'm just going to talk about my favorite to start with, and that is the 28mm. And PolarPro calls this the one. And I think basically what they're saying is if you're only going to buy one of the 3 lenses, they think the 28mm is the one to buy, and I would agree with that. It is a very cool lens. Now, the image character or the image traits you're going to get out of this lens is you're going to get an approximately 40% in focus area in the center of frame. As it gets beyond that, it begins to fall off very quickly, and you get a very soft focus at the edges. It's a fixed focus lens, and the focus starts at 1 meter and goes to infinity, but I find the best results with this lens are when you put a subject in the frame somewhere between 1 and 5 meters away. Although it does work at infinity as well, I find having a subject in the frame kind of adds the most interest or creates the most interesting images. The other thing you're going to notice with this lens is it does have noticeable vignette as you get to the edges of frame. It isn't crazy or anything, but it just overall adds to the character of the image. And what I like about this lens in particular is it gives you an image that is interesting even when taking pictures of very mundane things, but it doesn't give you an image that just feels like it's ruined or no good or super soft. In the center frame, you do get a reasonable amount of resolution and detail. So you can go around and take pictures of just benign objects or random things, and you get a really interesting look out of this lens. When we look at the other two, one of them gives you a really, really crazy look, and the other one is almost more on the clinical side. But I think the 28mm strikes a nice balance with a sharp center frame, a little bit of vignette, and fall off as we go to the corners. I think it's also a lens that will work very well on aps-c sensor cameras, because if you crop into aps-c mode, you're going to get a 40mm focal length or thereabout, which is also a very, very useful focal length. And on full frame cameras being a 28mm focal length, this is one of my favorite focal lengths of all time for just walk around, do everything, street photography, travel, family, just about anything. I think 28mm is super cool. The other thing you're going to get out of this lens is it's going to have reasonably heavy pincushion distortion as you get to the edge of frame, which adds a very interesting look. The other thing about pincushion distortion, when you take photos of people, it actually is a little bit slimming on them. So it will make people in the center frame look a little bit slimmer than they are in real life. The other thing that's really nice about the 28mm lens is, although it is an all metal body and it feels quite premium, it isn't heavy by any means. And with smaller cameras, it can make those cameras borderline pocketable. So when you've got a really versatile focal length like this, you throw it on a small camera body, you could virtually put this in your pocket, and it's just a really nice package to use. The other thing I will mention is with all these lenses, you do have a fixed aperture, which I think is f11. Yes, it's an f11 aperture. Now in low light conditions, that's not going to get a lot of light onto the sensor. But if you take photos, let that ISO run crazy. Don't worry about it. And then when you bring it into editing, change those photos to black and white, and you're going to get some really cool, interesting images. And you can get away with shooting super high ISO values if you convert the photos to black and white afterwards. Now, my second favorite lens of the group is the 50mm, and it is a little bit more of a clinical lens. So if you are looking at the images out of the 28mm in this video and you're like, nah, those are a bit too crazy for me, 50mm might be the right one for you, because you're going to get a 70% in focus sweet spot in the center of frame, and then you are going to get a focus distance that is a fixed focus, starts at 3 meters and goes all the way to infinity. The 50mm also works very well with small flashes, where you get that really interesting disposable camera type look. The other thing that's interesting about the 50mm focal length, because the minimum focus distance is at 3 meters, you can put things in the frame closer than that 3 meters, and you've got a subject and then you've got some foreground. The foreground can actually be out of focus, which gets you quite an interesting look, and I did that in a few of the examples that you've seen in this video. And the last lens is the 16mm lens. Now this one has got a heck of a lot going on. You only get a 20% in focus sweet spot in the center frame. Your focus is from 1 meter to infinity, and you get extremely heavy vignette that is darkening edges of the corners. The one thing I will say about this lens is, if you're an aps-c shooter, you shoot this lens and it's going to give you a look which is not dissimilar to the 28mm. So if you're a Fuji shooter or you're a Sony aps-c shooter, then I actually think the 16mm could be quite a good option, because it's going to cut out the craziest of that heavy vignette, and it's also going to give you a bigger sweet spot in the center frame. You're probably going to be more like 30-35%, something like that, which is actually going to give you an image which isn't too far off what you're getting out of the 28mm. But on full frame, you are going to get these crazy heavy vignettes, this really small sweet spot, and it is kind of an interesting and crazy stylized look, but I think it's too extreme for most practical uses. And the other case I might see for this lens is if you are going to buy them as a set, you're already going to buy the 28 and the 50, then you do get a little bit of a discount if you buy them all as a set. And in that case, you might want to get the 16 just as part of that set. And really, if you want to get that ultimate disposable camera look, then I would suggest pairing it with one of these little TT Artisan flashes. These are tiny on-camera flashes. They work on pretty much all camera systems. They're a manual flash. You just set the power on the side by clicking this, and then you tap the different levels, how much strength you want the flash to have. And this can be used just to create that really cool disposable film kind of look. You can also use it in situations, say you're going out traveling at night, or you're in a bar or in a club and you want to get that cool stylized on-camera direct flash type look. You're going to be able to pair that with one of these lenses. And even though they're only f11 lenses and they don't allow a whole lot of light in, this is going to overcome that, and it's going to allow you to use any of these lenses in really dimly lit conditions. And I'd probably say the only disadvantage I see to these lenses is if you're somebody that doesn't have a whole lot of lenses right now and you're just after something that's affordable, you can get something like the TT Artisan Autofocus 35mm f1.8 for a very similar price. You can get this Viltrox 20mm f2.8 for a little bit more. So you can get quite good autofocus lenses right now, not far off these prices. But I don't think these lenses are actually competing with those lenses, and that is not their target demographic. These are really for somebody who's kind of looking for something creative, something interesting, something to spice up their photography. They probably have a whole lot of lenses already, and they just want something different. Then I think that is the target market for these lenses. And for me, even though I got all of these lenses for free with my own money, I would definitely buy the 28mm. I really like that lens. It gives you some really interesting character on full frame cameras, but if you crop in, you can get a little bit more of a clinical look, which is a little bit more similar to the 50mm. So these are quite affordable lenses, and for the right person, I think they do represent good value for money. Now, if you're after some more affordable lens options, whether it be for APS-C or full frame cameras, I've just thrown some videos on screen now. That is 36 APS-C lenses, which are really budget friendly. And this one is like 10 or so under $100 full frame lenses. So if you're just looking for some more affordable lens options, check out those videos as well.